In the heart of a sprawling city where skyscrapers pierced the clouds and neon lights painted the streets, Deputy Director Sarah Collins sat behind the wheel of her sleek black car. The engine hummed softly as she navigated through the labyrinth of roads late at night. To anyone watching, she looked like just another wealthy driver cruising through the urban jungle. But appearances can be deceiving. Sarah wasn't merely an ordinary citizen out for a midnight drive. She was one of the most respected figures in the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. Her reputation was built on years of dedication to rooting out corruption wherever it festered. Tonight, however, she had taken on a different role, that of bait. The mission was clear yet perilous. For months, rumors had swirled about a group of rogue police officers exploiting their authority for personal gain. These weren't small-time offenders. They were part of a larger network that thrived on intimidation, bribery, and abuse of power. Sarah's task was simple: to lure them into revealing their true colors while gathering enough evidence to bring them down. As she drove past empty alleys and flickering streetlights, Sarah felt a mix of nerves and excitement coursing through her veins. She knew what was coming next. It always happened when someone like her, a well-dressed individual driving an expensive car, crossed paths with dirty cops looking to make a quick buck. And sure enough, within minutes, flashing blue lights appeared in her rearview mirror. Her pulse quickened slightly, but not because she was afraid. No, Sarah had faced far worse situations during her career. What made her heart race now was anticipation, the thrill of knowing she was moments away from catching these predators in their own trap. She pulled over smoothly to the side of the road, careful not to give them any reason to suspect something unusual. Two uniformed officers stepped out of their patrol car, their boots clicking against the pavement as they approached her vehicle. They moved with an air of superiority, their expressions smug and entitled. One carried a flashlight which he swung lazily toward her window, while the other rested his hand casually on the grip of his holstered gun. Both radiated the kind of confidence that came from believing they were untouchable. "License and registration," the taller officer demanded, his voice sharp and commanding. He leaned down to peer inside her car, his eyes scanning the luxurious interior with undisguised greed. His partner stood a few steps back, arms crossed, clearly enjoying the spectacle. Sarah complied without hesitation, rolling down her window and reaching for her purse. She played her part perfectly, adopting the demeanor of someone caught off guard by unexpected trouble. "I'm so sorry, officer," she said, her tone tinged with nervousness. "Was I going too fast? I swear I didn't realize." The officer cut her off with a dismissive wave. "That's not the issue here," he interrupted, his lips curling into a sly grin. "You see, we've noticed a lot of suspicious activity around this area lately. Expensive cars like yours tend to attract attention." His words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Sarah tilted her head slightly, feigning confusion. "Suspicious activity? What do you mean?" The second officer chimed in, his tone dripping with mockery. "Let's just say people sometimes forget how important it is to keep our streets safe, especially those who can afford nice things." He tapped the roof of her car for emphasis, his meaning crystal clear. Sarah hesitated, pretending to weigh her options. Then with deliberate slowness, she opened her wallet and pulled out a stack of bills. "Is there anything I can do to help?" she asked, her voice trembling convincingly. "Maybe settle this right here?" The officers exchanged glances, their smirks widening. This was exactly what they wanted, a frightened Mark willing to pay up to avoid trouble. The taller officer extended his hand, ready to accept the bribe. But before he could take the money, Sarah stopped him with a single sentence. "I think you should know who you're dealing with first," she said calmly, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. With practiced ease, she flipped open her badge case, revealing the unmistakable emblem of the FBI. "Deputy Director Sarah Collins," she announced, locking eyes with both men. "And you've just committed extortion against a federal agent." For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The officers froze, their faces morphing from cocky arrogance to sheer panic. One stumbled backward, stammering apologies, while the other dropped to his knees, his hands shaking uncontrollably. "Ma'am, please, we didn't know, we thought—" "That's the problem," Sarah interjected, her voice cold and unyielding. "You don't think. You abuse your authority, because you believe no one will hold you accountable. But tonight you're wrong." Her words echoed in the silence, each syllable carrying the weight of years spent fighting corruption. The officer's bravado evaporated instantly, replaced by raw fear as they realized the gravity of their mistake. Little did they know. This encounter was only the beginning of their downfall and the start of a much larger operation to expose the rot infecting their ranks. Sarah watched them closely, her expression unreadable. She had anticipated this moment for weeks, meticulously planning every detail to ensure nothing went awry. Now, as backup units closed in and cameras captured the scene, she allowed herself a brief sense of satisfaction. Justice might be delayed, but it was never denied, not on her watch. The atmosphere shifted dramatically as Sarah revealed her identity. The two officers who moments ago had been radiating confidence and arrogance now stood frozen in shock. Their faces turned pale, and their bodies stiffened like deer caught in headlights. The taller officer, the one who had initially demanded her license and registration, stammered, his voice trembling. "What? Federal agent? No, this has to be a mistake." Sarah didn't flinch. Her calm demeanor remained unshaken, even as the situation grew more intense. She leaned slightly forward, her piercing gaze locking onto the officer's panicked eyes. "No mistake," she replied firmly. "You just tried to extort money from me, a federal agent. Do you understand what that means?" The second officer, the one who had tapped on her car roof with such smugness, suddenly dropped to his knees. His hands shot up instinctively as if he were surrendering to an armed assailant. "Please, ma'am," he pleaded, his voice cracking under the weight of fear. "We didn't know. We thought you were just some rich person driving around late at night. We swear we didn't mean anything by it." Sarah's expression hardened further. She had heard countless excuses like these during her career, people trying to justify their actions when caught red-handed. But tonight wasn't about excuses. It was about accountability. "It doesn't matter what you thought," she said, her tone sharp but controlled. "What matters is what you did. You abused your authority. You used your badge to intimidate an innocent citizen into giving you money. That's not policing, that's criminal behavior." The taller officer, still standing but visibly shaking, tried to salvage the situation. "Look, Deputy Director," he began, his voice desperate. "We're good cops, okay? We've been doing our jobs for years. This was just a one-time thing, a stupid mistake. Please give us another chance." Sarah raised an eyebrow, her skepticism evident. "A one-time thing?" she repeated, letting the words hang in the air. "How many other one-time things have you pulled over the years? How many citizens have you shaken down like this? And how many walked away too scared to report you because they believed no one would listen?" Her questions struck a nerve. Both officers exchanged uneasy glances, their guilt written all over their faces. They knew they were cornered and there was no way out of this mess. Still, desperation pushed them to keep talking. "We're not bad people," the kneeling officer muttered almost under his breath. We got caught up in something bigger than us. It's not just us. It's everyone. The system makes you do things you wouldn't normally do." Sarah sighed deeply, her frustration evident. She had heard this argument before, the classic, "everybody's doing it" defense. While part of her understood the pressures within certain corrupt systems, she refused to let it become an excuse for wrongdoing. "If everyone jumped off a bridge, would you follow them too?" she asked pointedly. "Being part of a flawed system doesn't absolve you of responsibility. In fact, it makes holding you accountable even more important." As she spoke, backup units began arriving at the scene. Unmarked cars surrounded the area, their headlights illuminating the tense standoff. Agents poured out, moving with precision and purpose. Some approached the two officers, handcuffs already in hand, while others set up cameras to document the encounter. Sarah stepped aside, allowing her team to take over. She watched silently as the officers were read their rights and placed under arrest. Despite the chaos unfolding around her, Sarah's mind remained focused. This operation wasn't just about catching two rogue cops. It was about dismantling an entire network of corruption. These men weren't isolated offenders. They were threads in a much larger web. And tonight's sting was only the beginning. One of her agents approached her, holding a thin folder. Inside were documents detailing connections between these officers and higher-ranking officials involved in similar schemes. Names, dates, locations. It was all there. Sarah flipped through the pages briefly, her jaw tightening. The scope of the corruption was staggering, reaching far beyond what she had initially anticipated. "Deputy Director," the agent said cautiously, breaking her concentration. "What's the next step? Do we move forward with the investigation or do we wait for orders from above?" Sarah closed the folder and handed it back to him. "We don't wait," she replied firmly. "Every second we delay gives them time to cover their tracks. We need to act fast, secure the evidence, track down anyone else implicated, and prepare for the fallout." The agent nodded, understanding the urgency. As he walked away to relay her instructions, Sarah turned her attention back to the arrested officers. They were being loaded into separate vehicles, their heads bowed in shame. She felt a pang of sadness, not for them, but for the institution they represented. Law enforcement was supposed to protect and serve, yet here were two individuals who had betrayed that trust for personal gain. But sadness wasn't enough to stop her. If anything, it fueled her determination. Sarah had seen firsthand the damage caused by corruption, not just to victims but to society as a whole. It eroded public trust, created fear, and perpetuated cycles of abuse. Tonight's arrest was a small victory, but it symbolized something greater: hope. Hope that justice could prevail, even in the darkest corners of the system. As the last patrol car drove away, Sarah took a deep breath. The adrenaline rush of the operation was fading, replaced by a sense of clarity. She glanced at her watch. It was nearly 2 a.m., and the city was eerily quiet. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, a reminder of the work that lay ahead. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new obstacles to overcome, but for now, Sarah allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She thought about the countless honest officers working tirelessly to uphold the law, often overshadowed by the actions of a few bad apples. She thought about the citizens who deserved to feel safe in their own neighborhoods, free from exploitation and abuse. And she thought about the long road ahead, a journey filled with resistance, criticism, and setbacks, but also with opportunities to create real, lasting change. With renewed resolve, Sarah climbed back into her car. The engine roared to life as she pulled away from the curb, leaving behind the remnants of tonight's operation. Her mission was far from over, but she was ready. Whatever came next, she would face it head-on, driven by a single unwavering belief: justice may take time, but it always finds its way. The scene outside Sarah's car had transformed into a flurry of activity. Agents moved with purpose, their training evident in every step they took. Cameras flashed intermittently, capturing the stunned expressions of the two officers as they were led away in handcuffs. The taller officer, his earlier bravado completely shattered, struggled to keep his composure. His face was flushed with embarrassment, his eyes darting nervously between the agents and Sarah. The second officer, still on his knees, looked like a man who had just seen his entire world crumble before him. Sarah stood a few feet away, observing everything unfold with a mix of satisfaction and resolve. This wasn't personal for her. It never was. But there was something cathartic about seeing these men who had once wielded their power so recklessly, brought down by the very system they thought would protect them. She knew this moment wouldn't fix everything overnight, but it was a start. A crack in the foundation of corruption that could grow into something much bigger. As one of the agents secured the kneeling officer's hands behind his back, he muttered under his breath, "You don't understand. We're not the real problem here." His voice carried a desperate edge, as if hoping someone, anyone, would listen. Sarah overheard him and turned sharply, her sharp gaze locking onto his trembling form. "Then explain it to me," she said, her tone calm but firm. "Who is the real problem? Because from where I'm standing, You're both guilty of abusing your authority. If there's more to this story, now's your chance to tell it." The officer hesitated, clearly torn between fear and self-preservation. Finally, he blurted out, "It's not just us, there are others, higher-ups, who've been doing this for years. They pressure us, make us do things we don't want to. It's like, if you don't play along, you're out. Or worse." Sarah didn't respond immediately. Instead, she exchanged a glance with one of her senior agents, Agent Martinez, who was overseeing the operation. Martinez gave a subtle nod, signaling that they already had leads pointing toward higher-ranking officials. These officers weren't lying. They were pawns in a much larger game. "Names," Sarah demanded, stepping closer. "If you're telling the truth, give me names. Who exactly are these higher-ups?" The kneeling officer glanced at his partner, who stared straight ahead, refusing to meet his gaze. For a brief moment, it seemed like neither of them would say anything. But then the taller officer sighed deeply, resignation etched across his face. "Captain Harris," he admitted reluctantly. "He orchestrates most of it. He sets targets, people, to shake down, and splits the profits among his inner circle." Sarah's expression remained impassive, though inside, her mind raced. Captain Harris wasn't just any officer. He was a decorated veteran with decades of service under his belt. His reputation in the department was untouchable, or so everyone believed. If what these men were saying was true, then Harris wasn't just complicit in the corruption. He was its architect. "And how does it work?" she pressed, her voice steady despite the gravity of the revelation. "Do you have records? Paper trails? Anything that can tie him to these activities?" The officers exchanged another uneasy look. This time, it was the kneeling officer who spoke. "Mostly cash transactions," he explained. "But there's a locker down at the precinct. Harris keeps files there, ledgers, receipts, photos, and everything he needs to keep tabs on people. If you find that, you'll have all the proof you need." Sarah nodded slowly, absorbing the information. A locker filled with incriminating evidence. If it existed, it could be the smoking gun they needed to dismantle the entire network. But getting to it wouldn't be easy. Precincts were notoriously difficult to infiltrate without raising suspicion, especially when dealing with someone as cunning as Captain Harris. "Agent Martinez," Sarah called out, motioning for him to join her. When he arrived, she whispered instructions into his ear. "Send a team to secure that locker, discreetly, and bring whatever's inside directly to me." Martinez nodded and quickly relayed the orders to a small group of agents. As they prepared to leave, Sarah turned her attention back to the arrested officers. "If either of you tries to warn Harris or anyone else, you'll regret it," she warned, her tone leaving no room for doubt. "Your cooperation might be the only thing keeping you out of maximum security. Don't throw that away." Both men nodded vigorously, their earlier defiance replaced by sheer desperation. They knew they were trapped, and their only hope now was to cooperate fully. With that, Sarah signaled for the agents to load them into separate vehicles and transport them to a secure location for further questioning. Back at FBI headquarters, Sarah gathered her team in a dimly lit conference room. Maps, photographs, and documents covered the walls, each piece of evidence adding another layer to the intricate web of corruption they were unraveling. At the center of it all was Captain Harris's name, circled in red marker. "This changes everything," Sarah began, addressing her team. "Harris isn't just a rogue officer. He's the linchpin holding this entire operation together. Take him down and the rest will collapse, but we need to move carefully. One misstep and he'll bury the evidence or worse, disappear." Her words hung heavy in the air. Everyone in the room understood the stakes. Harris wasn't going to go quietly. He had spent years building his empire, and he wouldn't hesitate to destroy anyone who threatened it. That meant they couldn't rely solely on the contents of the locker. They needed multiple angles of attack. "We'll divide into teams," Sarah continued. "One will focus on securing the locker and analyzing its contents. Another will dig into Harris's financials, bank accounts, property holdings, anything that might show patterns of illicit activity. A third team will handle surveillance. We need eyes on him 24/7 until we're ready to make our move." As assignments were handed out, Sarah took a moment to reflect on the complexity of the case. Corruption cases were always tricky, but this one felt different. It wasn't just about catching bad actors, it was about exposing a culture of abuse that had festered for years. Every bribe, every threat, every act of intimidation, it all stemmed from a broken system that rewarded greed and punished integrity. Still, Sarah refused to let cynicism cloud her judgment. She had spent her career fighting battles like this, and she knew that change was possible, even if it came slowly and painfully. What mattered most was staying focused, staying relentless, and never losing sight of the ultimate goal: justice. Meanwhile, Agent Martinez and his team arrived at the precinct, blending seamlessly into the late-night crowd of officers coming and going. The locker in question was located in a restricted area, accessible only to high-ranking personnel. Breaking in undetected required precision and timing. Using a combination of technical expertise and insider knowledge provided by the arrested officers, the team managed to bypass the security system without triggering any alarms. Inside the locker, they found exactly what they had hoped for: stacks of documents detailing years of illegal activities. There were ledgers listing names and amounts paid, photos of meetings between Harris and various individuals, and even audio, recordings of conversations discussing bribes and threats. Martinez carefully packed everything into evidence bags, his heart pounding with excitement. This was the breakthrough they had been waiting for, the kind of evidence that could take down not just Harris, but an entire network of corrupt officials. As he and his team slipped out of the precinct unnoticed, he couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. They were one step closer to dismantling the rot that had plagued the department for far too long. By the time Martinez returned to headquarters, the sun was beginning to rise, casting golden light through the windows of the conference room. Sarah greeted him with a determined smile, her energy unwavering despite the long night. Together they reviewed the evidence, piecing together the puzzle bit by bit. For the first time in months, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. The road ahead was still fraught with challenges, but they finally had the tools they needed to fight back. Corruption thrived in darkness, feeding on secrecy and fear. But with each new discovery, they were shining a light into those shadows, exposing the truth for all to see. As the day broke over the city, Sarah stood by the window, watching the streets come alive with activity. Somewhere out there, Captain Harris was going about his routine, unaware that his empire was crumbling around him. Justice may take time, Sarah thought, but it always finds its way. And today, it was closer than ever. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of FBI headquarters, casting long shadows across the bustling office. Agents moved with urgency, their footsteps echoing on the tiled floor as they carried stacks of documents and digital devices from one workstation to another. The atmosphere was electric, charged with the energy of a team on the brink of uncovering something monumental. At the center of it all was Deputy Director Sarah Collins, her sharp eyes scanning reports and briefing notes as she coordinated the next phase of the operation. Sarah had spent the early hours of the day poring over the contents of Captain Harris's locker. Each document, each ledger entry, and each photograph painted a clearer picture of the corruption that had infiltrated the department. It wasn't just bribery, it was an intricate system designed to exploit, intimidate, and control. Names of their officers, politicians, and even local business owners were listed alongside amounts paid or extorted. Some entries included cryptic notes about favors owed or threats made, hinting at a web of influence that stretched far beyond what anyone had anticipated. But the most damning piece of evidence was a series of audio recordings. In them, Harris could be heard orchestrating schemes with chilling precision. He spoke casually about shaking down citizens, dividing profits among his inner circle, and silencing anyone who dared to speak out. His voice was calm, almost matter-of-fact, as though he viewed these crimes not as betrayals of trust but as routine transactions. Listening to those recordings sent chills down Sarah's spine, not because of the content itself but because of how deeply ingrained this behavior seemed to be within the system. As she reviewed the material, Sarah called for an emergency meeting with her senior team. The conference room buzzed with anticipation as agents filed in, clutching folders and laptops. Once everyone was seated, Sarah stood at the head of the table, her presence commanding attention without needing to raise her voice. "We've got him," she began, her tone firm yet measured. "Harris is the key to unraveling this entire network. But we need to act fast. If he senses we're closing in, he'll destroy evidence or worse, disappear." Agent Martinez nodded in agreement. "We've already identified several properties linked to Harris," he said, pulling up a map on the screen behind Sarah. "He owns a luxury condo downtown under a shell company, along with a cabin upstate. Both locations are likely safe houses, where he could hole up if things go south." Sarah studied the map carefully. "Good work," she acknowledged. "But we can't risk tipping him off by moving too aggressively. Surveillance will be critical. I want eyes on him 24/7. Every movement, every phone call, every interaction documented. We need to know exactly when and where to strike." Another agent raised her hand hesitantly. "What about internal pushback?" she asked. "If we go after someone like Harris, there's bound to be resistance, not just from within the department, but from higher-ups who benefit from his operations. How do we handle that?" It was a valid concern, and Sarah knew it wouldn't be easy. Taking down a figure like Harris meant challenging powerful interests, many of whom had spent years protecting their turf. She leaned forward slightly, resting her hands on the table as she addressed the group. "This isn't just about Harris," she explained. "It's about sending a message that no one is above the law. Yes, there will be resistance. People will try to discredit us, delay us, even threaten us. But we have the evidence and we have the truth. That's our shield. As long as we stay united and focused, we can weather whatever comes our way." Her words resonated with the team, bolstering their resolve. They understood the risks involved, but they also knew the importance of what they were doing. Corruption couldn't thrive in silence. Exposing it required courage, persistence, and unwavering integrity. With the plan set, the team split into smaller units to tackle different aspects of the investigation. One group focused on analyzing the financial records tied to Harris, tracing suspicious transactions, and identifying hidden assets. Another worked tirelessly to decode the audio recordings, isolating key moments that could be used as direct evidence against him. Meanwhile, surveillance teams fanned out across the city, tracking Harris's movements with painstaking precision. Sarah oversaw everything, ensuring that each piece of the puzzle fit seamlessly together. She spent hours reviewing transcripts of intercepted communications, searching for any mention of accomplices or additional co-conspirators. Every detail mattered, no matter how small. A single overlooked clue could mean the difference between success and failure. At one point, Agent Martinez entered her office, holding a tablet displaying a recent development. "We found something interesting," he said, placing the device on her desk. On the screen was a photograph taken during a covert stakeout. Harris was shown meeting with a well-dressed man outside a high-end restaurant. Their body language suggested familiarity, and the conversation appeared animated. "Who's the other guy?" Sarah asked, leaning closer to examine the image. Martinez scrolled through a database until he landed on a profile. "This is Councilman Gregor," he explained. "He's been vocal about supporting law enforcement reform, but according to our intel, he's been funneling money to Harris in exchange for protection during zoning disputes. Looks like Harris has been using his position to strong-arm property developers into paying kickbacks." Sarah frowned, her frustration evident. "So much for reform," she muttered. "Add him to the list. If we're going to clean house, we need to take down everyone involved, not just Harris." Martinez nodded and updated the file before leaving the room. Sarah sat back in her chair, rubbing her temples as she processed the new information. The deeper they dug, the more entrenched the corruption seemed to be. It wasn't just a few rogue officers. It was a systemic issue that had infected multiple levels of government and law enforcement. Rooting it out would require nothing short of a revolution. As the day wore on, Sarah found herself reflecting on the broader implications of the case. While she was determined to bring justice to those who had abused their power, She couldn't ignore the toll it would take on the department as a whole. Many officers were honest, hardworking individuals who put their lives on the line every day to protect others. Would exposing the corruption tarnish their reputation as well? Would it erode public trust in law enforcement even further? She thought about her own career, the countless cases she had worked on, the lives she had touched, the battles she had fought. For every corrupt official she had brought to justice, there were dozens of honorable men and women whose dedication inspired her to keep going. This case wasn't about vilifying the badge. It was about restoring its integrity. Late in the afternoon, Sarah decided to pay a visit to the precinct where Harris was stationed. She walked through the halls unnoticed, observing the officers as they went about their duties. Some looked weary, burdened by long hours and low pay. Others seemed indifferent, perhaps numb to the realities of the job. And then there were those who radiated passion and purpose, the kind of people who reminded Sarah why she had joined the FBI in the first place. She stopped briefly to speak with a young officer named Ramirez, who had recently graduated from the academy. He recognized her immediately and saluted nervously. "Deputy Director Collins," he stammered. "Is everything okay?" Sarah smiled warmly, putting him at ease. "Everything's fine, Officer Ramirez," she assured him. "I just wanted to see how things are running here. How are you finding the job so far?" Ramirez hesitated, unsure whether to share his thoughts with someone of her rank. Finally, he admitted, "It's challenging. There's a lot of pressure to perform, and sometimes it feels like the odds are stacked against us. But I believe in what we're doing. I really do." His sincerity touched Sarah. She placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Hold on to that belief," she told him, "because it's the foundation of real change. Not everyone shares your values, but that doesn't mean you should lose faith. Keep fighting for what's right even when it's hard. That's what makes you a true guardian of justice." Ramirez nodded, gratitude shining in his eyes. As Sarah walked away, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. This case wasn't just about dismantling a corrupt network. It was about paving the way for officers like Ramirez to serve without compromise. It was about creating a future where honesty and integrity weren't exceptions, but expectations. By evening, the pieces of the puzzle were falling into place. Surveillance teams reported that Harris had grown increasingly paranoid, frequently checking his surroundings and avoiding prolonged conversations. Financial analysts uncovered irregularities in his accounts, linking him to offshore investments and shell companies, and forensic experts confirmed that the audio recordings were authentic, providing irrefutable proof of his involvement in criminal activities. Sarah gathered her team once more, this time in the war room, a secure space filled with monitors, displaying live feeds and data streams. The mood was tense but hopeful. Everyone knew they were nearing the end game. "We strike tomorrow," Sarah announced, her voice steady and resolute. "Arrest warrants are being issued as we speak. By dawn, Harris will be in custody, along with anyone else implicated in this scheme. Our goal is simple. Leave no stone unturned. Justice demands nothing less." The agents exchanged determined glances, their shared mission uniting. The sun had barely risen when Deputy Director Sarah Collins stepped into the bustling command center of the FBI headquarters. The room buzzed with activity. Agents huddled around monitors, phones rang incessantly, and papers shuffled between desks as everyone prepared for what would be one of the most significant operations of their careers. Today was the day they would bring down Captain Harris and his network of corruption. Sarah stood at the front of the room, her presence commanding attention without needing to raise her voice. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was 6:30 a.m. and every second counted. "All right, team," she began, her tone firm but calm. "This is it. Everything we've worked for over the past months comes down to today. Let's make sure we do this right." She turned to Agent Martinez, who was coordinating logistics. "Surveillance teams, are we live?" Martinez nodded, pointing to a bank of screens displaying real-time footage from various locations. "Yes, ma'am. We've got eyes on Harris at his condo. He hasn't left yet, but he's been pacing near the windows. Looks nervous." "Good," Sarah replied. "Let's keep it that way. Once we move in, there can't be any room for error. What about the arrest warrants? Another agent handed her a folder containing signed documents, all approved and ready to execute. Councilman Gregor and 2 other high-ranking officials are also included, based on the evidence we gathered. Sarah flipped through the pages quickly, ensuring everything was in order. Her mind raced as she considered the scope of the operation. Arresting Harris alone wouldn't be enough. They needed to dismantle the entire network simultaneously to prevent anyone from warning others or destroying evidence. Timing was critical. At precisely 7 a.m., the first phase of the operation commenced. SWAT teams, accompanied by FBI agents, moved swiftly toward Harris's luxury condo downtown. The building was evacuated quietly under the guise of a routine fire drill, allowing the team to enter without drawing unnecessary attention. As they approached Harris's unit, tension filled the air. Every agent knew the stakes. If Harris resisted or managed to escape, it could jeopardize the entire investigation. A loud knock echoed through the hallway. "Captain Harris, open up, this is the FBI," an agent called out, his voice authoritative. Inside, Harris froze, his heart pounding. He had suspected something might be coming after noticing unusual activity around him in recent days, but he hadn't expected it so soon. His mind raced as he considered his options. Should he try to run, hide, or bluff his way out? Before he could decide, the door burst open, and armed agents stormed in. Harris raised his hands instinctively, his face pale with shock. "What is this?" he demanded, his voice trembling despite his attempt to sound defiant. "You have no right." Agent Martinez stepped forward, holding up the arrest warrant. "Captain Harris, you're under arrest for extortion, bribery, and conspiracy to commit criminal acts. You have the right to remain silent." As Harris was cuffed and led away, another team raided his cabin upstate, recovering additional evidence hidden there. Meanwhile, separate units executed simultaneous raids on Councilman Gregor's home and the offices of 2 other implicated officials. By mid-morning, all key players in the corruption ring were in custody. Back at headquarters, Sarah briefed her superiors on the operation's success. While some praised the swift action, not everyone was pleased. One senior official, Assistant Director Thompson, expressed concern about the potential fallout. "Sarah," he said cautiously, "you've taken down some powerful people today. Do you realize how much backlash this will cause? Public trust in law enforcement is already fragile. This kind of exposure could make things worse." Sarah crossed her arms, her expression unwavering. "With respect, sir, public trust isn't broken because of cases like this. It's broken because these kinds of crimes go unpunished. If we want citizens to believe in the system again, we need to show them that justice applies to everyone, regardless of rank or influence." Thompson sighed, rubbing his temples. "I understand your point, but you're ignoring the political ramifications. These men have allies, people who won't take kindly to seeing their friends dragged through the mud. And let's not forget the media circus this is going to create." Sarah leaned forward slightly, her voice steady but firm. "Then we'll handle the media circus. Transparency is our strongest weapon here. If we release the evidence carefully, showing exactly what these men did and why they deserve to face consequences, we can turn public opinion in our favor. But if we back down now, if we try to sweep this under the rug, we're no better than the people we're arresting." Thompson studied her for a moment, clearly weighing the risks. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. "Fine. But tread carefully, Sarah. One misstep, and this whole thing could blow up in our faces." "I understand," she replied. "And I'm prepared for whatever comes next." Kindly continue for the remainder of the expanded Part 5 content below. While Sarah focused on managing the political pushback, tensions within the department began to rise. News of Harris's arrest spread quickly among officers, sparking heated debates in precincts across the city. Some applauded the takedown, viewing it as long overdue justice for the countless victims of corruption. Others, however, felt betrayed, believing that Harris's actions were exaggerated or justified, given the pressures of the job. One particularly vocal group of officers organized an impromptu meeting at a local diner to discuss their concerns. Among them was Lieutenant Daniels, a seasoned officer known for his loyalty to Harris. "They're making us look bad," he exclaimed, slamming his fist on the table. "Harris wasn't perfect, sure, but neither is anyone else. Why single him out?" Across the room, Officer Ramirez, the young recruit Sarah had spoken to earlier, spoke up hesitantly. "Because he broke the law," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "We took an oath to serve and protect, not to exploit or intimidate. If we start excusing bad behavior, we lose sight of what it means to wear the badge." The argument grew louder, dividing the room into factions. For many, the case against Harris represented a reckoning, a chance to confront the systemic issues plaguing the department. For others, it felt like an attack on the institution itself. Later that evening, Sarah sat alone in her office, reflecting on the day's events. The operation had gone as planned, but the resistance she faced from both higher-ups and fellow officers was sobering. She knew dismantling corruption wouldn't be easy. It required challenging deeply ingrained beliefs and confronting uncomfortable truths. But Sarah refused to let doubt creep in. She thought about the victims of Harris's schemes, the families forced to pay bribes, the businesses destroyed by extortion, the honest officers disheartened by the culture of abuse. Their stories fueled her determination to see this through, no matter the cost. Her phone buzzed on the desk, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Agent Martinez. "Press conference scheduled for tomorrow morning. Ready to face the world?" Sarah smiled faintly, typing a simple reply. "Always." Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. Justice might be messy and complicated, but it was worth fighting for. And Sarah Collins wasn't about to stop until the job was done.